Hello chaps, it's Commodore Graham here, and I thought I'd do something a little different. I'd do a little instructional video on how to record videos that are immediately ready to upload to YouTube in 1080p and 60 frames per second if you want, as long as you have an Nvidia graphics card that has the NVENC encoding chip on it. Now, I have a GTX 960. I used to have a GTX 750 Ti. They both had the encoding chip on the GPU. So essentially, any reasonably good, reasonably newish Nvidia graphics card will probably have this capability. So the first thing that you need to do is grab yourself the piece of software that you can see on my desktop right here, OBS Studio. It's a free piece of video recording software, essentially. You can also use it for streaming, but I'm just showing you how to record videos right now. So you will find it here at obsproject.com. If you just Google OBS Studio, you'll find it. And here you have the latest version for Windows 7 and above. If you have a Mac or Linux, I guess go for those. I don't have any experience in those, but you know, that's fine. That's fine. I can't comment on that. So download OBS Studio, install it, and when you start it up, what you want to do is create a scene. I have various scenes here for recording different games, streaming different games, but you create yourself a scene with this plus button here. Call it whatever you like. I'm just sticking with this this top scene that I have here. This is just my general generic recording scene. And over on just on the right here, you have the sources, which are the sources from which you are capturing video, which could be your desktop, as I'm doing right now, or it could be a game. So just for the purposes of demonstration, I've added a game capture source here as well. If you go to plus, you can add various different kinds of sources. Generally speaking, well, for this you will only use game capture. Maybe in some cases you might use display capture. I'm not sure. But just to demonstrate, I have Minecraft running in the background. So let's make that visible if we can. Okay. There we go. And if you want to record this new source, which at the moment is basically sitting right on top of the display capture, you click transition to transition from, you know, one scene to another, as it were, like so. And so it's possible that you're not seeing my desktop now. Yeah, you're probably not seeing my desktop now, even though I'm seeing it. So I'm going to transition back to my desktop. Right, okay, hopefully this is working just fine. So when you have a scene set up and you've decided on your sources, I will just go to my game capture source, which is what you'll probably be using, and have a look at the properties. Now, there are different modes you can use. A lot of the time, just using Capture Any full screen application will work. So when I'm recording, say, The Binding of Isaac or Rogue Legacy, and probably some other games too, it will just automatically latch on to whatever full screen application, i.e. game, that you're playing. But sometimes that doesn't work. So in the case of Minecraft, for instance, I had to select Capture Specific Window. Then there's another drop-down box here so that you can tell it exactly which window to capture. In this case, the Java window that's running Minecraft. Anyway, that's... Hold on, I'll just check that... Yeah, I was just checking that you could see that in OBS, which you can, apparently. So that's okay. The next thing that you have to do, and this is grayed out so I can't get to it, but if you click here in the profile menu, you will be able to create a new profile. And this is where you set up your settings of how you're actually encoding the video. So hopefully this will be, when you've created a profile and you've selected it, like the profile I'm using right here, as you can see, is YT for YouTube, 1080p, 60 frames per second, NVENC, 8 megabits per second. And where 8 megabits per second is the bit rate at which I'm recording the video, which essentially determines the quality of the video. So I have that profile selected, and to edit the settings for that profile, you go down here. I'll just check that, yeah, you should be seeing that. So you have various different settings tabs. This stuff here you don't really generally have to worry about. I'm going to leave that alone. The stream tab, you don't need to worry about that either unless you're streaming, which of course I'm not, and this tutorial is not about streaming. Oh, excuse me, hiccuping there. But if you are streaming, this is where you put your stream key from Twitch or Hitbox or Dailymotion or Restream or whatever else. Now, we'll get to the important tabs now. There's output. So I'm just using the simple output mode, which essentially, if you select advanced, it gives you more options for how you're going to encode the video, but you don't need to worry about that. So in terms of bit rate, it depends on what sort of game you're recording. So for instance, if I'm recording like a 2D game, like The Binding of Isaac, or like Rogue Legacy, or I don't know what else would be like that, Spelunky, or Prison Architect, or Civilization, or something like that, you don't need as high a bit rate to get a good level of quality, because the picture isn't changing as much between frames, generally speaking. So I just use a bit rate of 8,000 kilobits per second, otherwise known as 8 megabits per second. And here I'm using my hardware encoder, the encoder that's on my GPU, on my Nvidia GTX 980. Now you can select different encoders. The default here is the X264, which is a very good encoder, which produces very high quality video, but you need a very good CPU in order to be able to record something like 1080p, 60 frames per second, and play the game at the same time. That's certainly not something my system can do, since I only have like an i5 2500K, which is all right, but it's not amazing. So for the purposes of this tutorial, you select hardware NVENC. The audio bitrate, you generally speaking, you want to set that as high as you can. YouTube recommends 384 kilobits per second, but you actually can't go that high in OBS. But honestly, 320 kilobits per second sounds great. You don't need to worry about it. Check enable advanced encoder settings if you haven't already. Well, if it's not already checked by default. And select high quality. If you select this, then at the bitrate you've chosen, the NVENC chip will encode at a higher quality with like greater efficiency and such like. And I've never had any problem with this. The video that I get is completely smooth. It doesn't really ever drop any frames. Your mileage may vary. Hopefully that is the case with all NVENC enabled Nvidia graphics cards. So those are the only settings you need to worry about here. Let's go to the audio tab. So YouTube recommends a sample rate of 48 kilohertz, which is like DVD quality. So that's what it recommends. That's what I've gone for. Stereo, of course, you want that. The desktop audio device, that's what you'll be using to capture your game sounds. So usually default is completely fine. My my sound card, my actual sound card is this, the Focusrite USB. It's an external sound card. But since that's my default anyway, I can just select default, if that makes sense. Now, for microphone, like I've got a bit of a weird setup. We'll get into that in another video. But obviously you want to select whatever your microphone is. It might be the microphone on your headset, or maybe you've got a separate USB microphone like a Blue Yeti, Blue Snowball, Rode Podcaster, or whatever if you're really rich. In my case, I've got a Blue Yeti microphone. It's a nice microphone. If you're in the market for a microphone, however, you can go for a Blue Snowball. It's a lot cheaper. It's almost as good for this purpose, at least. The Blue Yeti just gives you some more options, but that's something maybe I'll get into in another video. So you would, if you were me, you could select Blue Yeti or your Blue Snowball or whatever else your microphone is. I have this weird setting here, which is like a virtual device. Don't worry about that. Do as I say, not as I do. I'll probably be explaining my audio setup, as I say, in another video. So, what else? You want to make sure that your output resolution is the same as your base resolution if you're wanting to record at 1080p. Presuming that you're playing the game in 1080p, make sure you select 60 frames per second if you want to record in 60 frames per second, which, I mean, is what this video is about. You should be able to, no problem at all, if you have a card that has NVENC, graphics card, that is. In the Hotkeys tab, I just have the decimal point button on the number pad set as my start and stop recording. Now here what I should mention is OBS doesn't always immediately start recording. So when I make a video, I'll press the record button and I'll kind of count to 3 in my head and then start talking, because otherwise maybe the first little bit of what I say will be cut off. And then when I've finished recording, I count to 3 in my head again and then press the stop key. That usually works just fine. It's a small price to pay for not having to, edit and re-render the video and so forth. I think it's probably lots of YouTubers do that, especially ones that produce a very large amount of videos per day. And now we have the advanced tab. The only thing that I've changed here, and again it's grayed out, so I can't actually get to the drop box, but that's fine, is the YUV color range. Now by default that's set as limited. If you leave it that way, the video that you produce will lack contrast and just be generally duller, and it just won't pop as much. PC monitors are set to use the full color range, 0 to 255 brightness, to get into the technical aspects of it a little. So if you want to take advantage of the full color range of your monitor, you need to set this to full. Your videos will look a hell of a lot better. I've changed, I think, nothing else here, but here are my other settings on this tab. For the color format, for the color space, they seem to work perfectly fine. So I think that's all of my settings and process and method covered. If you have things set up that way and you have a hotkey set up, you can just start your game, start the recording with whichever key you choose, play the game, chatter away, finish, press stop, and then you have a video at 8, as you if you remember, at 8 megabits per second, ready to upload to YouTube right away. The only other thing that I would mention is sound levels. So again, this kind of depends on your hardware, but let's go into that. As you can see in the main window of OBS, you've got an audio, just desktop audio, basically your PC sounds, the sounds coming from your game or whatever. You have a little input bar for that, and you have one for the microphone as well. Now, as you can see in my case, I have the desktop audio turned down a little bit. That's to help stop the game sounds ever getting louder than my voice and drowning them out. And with the microphone, it depends on what microphone you have, and you will have to mess around with these settings. But if I go to the little settings cog here, let's try going to properties. So as you can see, I've got my little sort of virtual input here. Let's not worry about that. Let's go instead to filters. Now you can add a filter with the little plus sign down here. The ones that really matter are the noise gate and noise suppression. So what this is about is stopping any sounds quieter than a certain level getting recorded. So if you have a hiss or a hum or a nasty whine or whatever coming from your microphone, you can kind of cancel that out. So what you do is you have a threshold setting for how loud a sound has to be to get past the noise gate and get recorded. So in my case, anything that's louder than minus 27 decibels, where 0 decibels is the loudest you can get, it's like a negative scale. 0's the top, and then it gets quieter and quieter. If you want to know more about that, I guess Google decibel scale. But mine's set at minus 27, so as long as it sounds louder than this, it will get recorded. And then generally you want, wherever you have this set, you want the close threshold to be like 6 decibels lower than that. And that's the threshold at which the volume, once the noise gate is open, the volume has to go below that level in order for it to turn off. These are my settings. You might need to fiddle around, but you do want them to be about 6 decibels apart, the open and the close threshold. Here are my settings for the attack, hold, and release time. That's like technical stuff. Don't worry about that. If you set it the same as mine, you'll probably be okay. The other thing that is super useful is the noise suppression, and this is a pretty new feature. And again, this will depend on the amount of noise you get from your microphone. I've got my noise suppression set pretty high. That is, the lower the setting is, the more noise suppression you have. Mine's set pretty high for reasons of like how I'm inputting audio into OBS. Again, that's probably going to be in another video. But you just have to mess around with this until essentially the noise disappears. You might only need to set it to minus 20, minus 30, something like that. It depends. But yeah, I think that's about it. Of course, as well as messing around with this volume level here, you can also mess around with the volume level in the actual game menu or in the volume mixer of Windows itself. You could turn the volume up or down here if you want. There's a few different ways that you can do it. It's really up to you. But that's it, I guess. That's my tutorial. hopefully it was of some use. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any suggestions for improvements for future tutorial videos, or even suggestions for more tutorial videos, let me know about that too. And oh yeah, click the like button, subscribe if you'd like more, and all of that jazz. See you later. Ta-ta for now.